This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For June 24th, 2022, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure. We are back on Friday, and auspiciously, for the first time in a long time, all six AV SuperFriends.
Wow, it is
We're
six.
all here. You got every single one of us. I'm going to name them off real quickly, but not name one of them. You have to guess who's missing. So, I kid you. My name's Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Jamie, Marc, Larry, Rachel, Justin, and a very special guest who will join us in a few moments to talk about some cool stuff. But first, let's go through what we're going to do today on the show. We're going to talk about MIDI control of PTZ cameras. Yes, you heard me. MIDI control of PTZ cameras.
It's the future.
Think about that
That's
one.
not even a tease, man. You just laid it all out there.
Let it rattle around a bit. Think.
Who would ever want that? The MIDI
we're also going to talk about the challenges of hiring AV staff. But first, the AV news. And it's AV related, and we love this product. This is the most ringing endorsement you will ever get. So I have two links for this article. One is from Ars Technica, which says that this product actually went slightly mainstream, or this issue, and the other is from EdScoop, so it's a little more education focused. But our favorite all-in-one conferencing camera, the meeting owl cam thing. God, I hate these things. I'm not pulling any punches. I will send people I have a bunch of these. I will send them to whoever emails me and explains the worst place.
Give them one away. Send them an email. We'll send it to you.
Famously, last year, I hauled one across the country so we could use one at a conference. Oh, my God, these things. Anyway, so it came out, and I will say here, before we even get to the news on this, but the short version is there was a what do you call it? A network security breach? I guess it's not really true. It was a how do we want to phrase this? A security hole? I don't know.
Vulnerability?
A vulnerability. Thank you, Larry, for the official term. So these things sitting on the network, and all of a sudden people are like, hey, we can get into your corporate network and look at all the crap we can do on your corporate network. So companies with bad security who put these things on their network probably deserve it. But this blew up here. So University of Wyoming has a handful of these floating around. It's not my fault. I have pulled a bunch of them back, but
I'm blaming you.
During COVID, when everyone was just buying whatever random stuff they saw, hey, as Jamie likes to call it, it's an all-in-wonder. So they bought a bunch of them and they just scattered them across campus. Well, that's fine, except they don't work the way you think they do. But the good news is, so it was a minor crisis here for about 30 minutes where the network security team saw this and said, hey, we've got a bunch of these floating around campus. We got to go shut them down, do all these things. Until I pointed out that none of ours are on the network because their network security protocols are terrible. It doesn't support authentication. It doesn't support enterprise networks. Doesn't support WPA2. It's Wi-Fi only. It's
Wi-Fi,
like the worst type of device.
To
the point where
here's a cell
our
phone.
networking team, and I'm not joking, our networking team uses one for testing Internet of Things devices because it's like the worst version of it. So, so that minor crisis ended after about 30 minutes, but it raised questions. It's like, how many people out there have these and have just plugged them in and dropped them on their network, and now God help you because your stuff's wide open.
I know of a certain flagship institution that may or may not be closely related to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, but not UMKC. Flagship that has a
University
few
of
of
Kansas.
these. Yeah. They did the same thing, and I think a lot of people did this. Like, hey, this is a cool thing. It's an all-in-one. It's just you do this thing and you do that, and I was cringing. And it's not just Alcam. It's a lot of these kind of consumerish,
the all-in-wonders.
All-in-wonders that it's the same argument we had with the Alexa devices a few years ago. It's like, we want all these things. And you're like, well, wait a minute. They're not designed to operate in our environment. And when you bring it in here, you don't understand how much it just absolutely impacts things and negatively impacts things as far as security goes into play. And I was really bashful about it, and now it's kind of like the I told you so moment. You remember? That was my prediction this year, so I'm going to bring it up as many times as I can.
This is the year of I told you so.
This one run.
This is the year of I told you so.
On this one, yeah, take it.
It's and the I told you so is like, you can't just go to the normal Walmart and buy this Alcam and think it's going to be the best thing ever. I know K-12 ate these things up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 'cause
And
they're
good
so
thing
cute
K-12
and
has the
friendly.
best.
They're
security
easy
posture.
and they work well.
And they hoot.
Nobody gives us complaints about them.
I've never even had one
I do
near
have a
me. Do they
genuine
actually
question.
hoot?
They actually
do
hoot
hoot.
when you plug
I'll
them
fire
in.
one up. Hold on.
A genuine question I had is, what the hell is it doing on the network? Why does it need it to begin with?
That's my question, because I have lost the battle, and there are a couple of these on our campus, but they are webcams. They do not get
Right.
connected to the network at all.
I think it's for that if you're in a business office environment, right, and you can just walk in, and
Is it
And can-
controlled that way?
Mark,
makes
it's
it
not controlled anyway. That's the problem.
But that's what I'm trying
All right,
to give it away.
So the
out
Wi-Fi
here.
does two things. One, there is some remote sharing stuff you can do, but you can link these cameras together. So you could have two of them like share a space, which is kind of a cool idea.
okay.
And again, it's interesting that there is no commercial product to replace these, though we did talk to the folks at Panasonic who announced a similar thing, but again, it's USB only too. So yeah, we talked about that on our perspective show from Infocom. But you can link these two together, but they communicate only via Wi-Fi. So what people do is they drop them on the network so that they can walk into a room and you can do your wireless connection and all that stuff to them. And it's like, but you're dropping a thing on the network that's functionally a at-home, at best style device, which now has connected everyone to your network. So
How easy is it to get on Wi-Fi? So if teachers and staff and all these people are using them on campus, and we're like, oh, they're not to be connected to the network, we're not blacklist them or anything.
by the way,
like that,
this one's going
right?
to hoot in a minute, so you'll hear it just a second.
So, hooty hoo. So, is it easy to do? Are clients able to just hit a couple buttons and it connects to Wi-Fi and it's no big deal? Or I guess it also depends on your Wi-Fi security, but let's call it the guest network, right? That's easy to do. So, how hard is that? Is it really a security risk if you have to log in to the Wi-Fi?
That was it. It literally hoots. So, Justin, to your question, everybody who got struck by this deserved it, because that means their Wi-Fi their network security either A, sucks, to your point, that all you need to do is just drop this on the network and away you go, or B, as I had to do here in testing, you have to go through all sorts of jump over all sorts of hurdles to get this to get exceptions for the network, to get, hard-coded MAC addresses, all sorts of stuff. So yes,
that's
you
why
can
it's
get
rare.
it on an enterprise network. Correct. You can get it on an enterprise network, but it takes work.
It's a hell of a
Okay.
So all the businesses and schools got hit by this. That means their network sucks, or their network security team sucks.
the people
But
who
how
administer it.
how can an end user, is there like administrative privileges on it, or can anybody that plugs into it activate the Wi-Fi and use their own passwords
How
or
do you
whatever?
do that? Is it just a web page? Like you have to get
Again,
you have
I've
to get
never
it connected
touched one
to
of
get to
these,
the web page.
so.
Or can you
Well,
connect your laptop directly to it and then tell it to point to another Wi-Fi? Like how
I mean,
does this
you can
actual...
get this. You can get this from B&H Photo, so anyone can buy it, get into your
Right.
network, and go. And at that point, they have access to the admin pages. So
How do you
anyone
get
can
there, though?
try. It's just you connect your laptop to it, username, password. It's the same thing we would do. If they're technically literate at all. Or same
Literate
thing we
at
would
all.
do, but we wouldn't do it.
I like that. I'm going to use that.
Okay.
I'm going to use that next week, Larry. Literal at all.
But I think
Technically literal at all.
I think the bigger story here is that these kind of devices got giant notoriety. I mean, think about even during the middle of the pandemic, Zoom was lambasted because their security protocols sucked, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just another example of that very thing, is that we really need to be careful about what we're purchasing, because it's not if it's going to happen. It's when is this announcement going to come for the next widget? And I don't know what the next widget is, but
as you have more like connected widgetry in your Internet of Things,
Yeah.
it's to be expected. You're going to have these types of vulnerabilities pop up because it's just the nature, and the race to get something to the market. How can we get there the fastest? And just throw a Wi-Fi card in there. It's like, well, really?
And we've
does-
always had the same issues with consumer versus commercial product. I mean, this is just the next version of that is security.
Yeah, I mean, it does make me wonder about that question of convenience at what cost. We had this conversation about Alexa too. People are terrifically resistant in theory and willing in practice to sacrifice a lot in exchange for convenience. And I think this device is just one more example of this. Like, theoretically, if you ask somebody like, hey, can I put this camera on your network that exposes your entire system to any hacker with a minimum of technical ability, you go like, no, never. But if you say like, hey, I've got a really cute, friendly looking camera that limits the amount of gear that you got to put in your room, and it's portable and it's just plug and play, you want to, can I put this in your room?
The dean got 20 of them.
Then all of a sudden people stop asking questions.
That same person that says yes, don't trust debit cards. Right. So it's like this whole thing of, oh yeah, let's do that, but I don't trust this thing over here. And
I do like that. I don't want my cell phone following me everywhere I go, but Alexa can unlock my doors. All I have to do is scream through a window and I can unlock my door.
Exactly. That's another great example.
All right. So I think that's the bigger picture here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to say two things. So there is a bit of a happy ending. They, of course, have patched the issue. That's fine, of course. Now, have they generally improved their network access and network security? Probably not. But they've at least patched whatever vulnerability was being exploited previously. The other thing is, I will say, these do have a place. Yes, the place is in the trash can. No, the place is, and I tell people, because every now and then on campus, I'll get requests. Hey, do you guys have any meeting owls? And I'll say, yes, I do. And I will give you one if you can meet two requirements. One, is your space small enough that almost everybody sitting at the table could reach out and touch this thing? If you're within about 4 or 5 feet, it's fine. Because the microphones on them they're better than your average laptop mic, but not much better. They're little electret microphones. Just they pick up what they can. But of course, the marketing folks get out in front and say, "Oh, you got a range of 15 feet." No, it does not. No, it's terrible.
Yelling.
The other thing I tell them is this does not integrate with any other existing presentation or conferencing system. So if you have anything else in your room, no, you cannot have this, because I don't want you to try to be, well, I've got there's a camera over here and we want to use that, but we want to switch to the owl for this. And then we're going to, no. If you have a basic conference room with only a display and no other audio or video reinforcement sort of stuff, then fine. We'll set this up in a small room and I will give it to you. Do not ever call me again. And every now and then someone does call. Hey, we can't get this to work again. See email from April. Enjoy. It's a webcam. Plug it in, go to Zoom, select the right inputs and outputs. I can't make it simpler than that. But we keep finding people who have managed to go, as you just said, Justin, they'll go out and buy them and they go put them in a classroom. And like, yeah, people can't hear us on this thing. No, I get it. They cannot hear you and they cannot see you. Please stop doing that, because now you're disenfranchising people who are paying full tuition and taking classes remotely, and you've put in a worse system than the system we already put in there 2 years ago. So
what I heard
that's my frustration.
Return to sender.
So what I've heard is that all those weird rooms that got delivered from a project that just have a display floating on the wall and nothing else to interface with them have a use.
Well, kind of, because if you use the speakers from the display, the Alcam will stare at the display.
It looks at the display.
You need a really old plasma with the speakers ripped off the sides, because the speakers came separate.
It's a way to convert digital signage installations to collaborative areas.
If it's video only, Larry is dead on. You cannot use other audio reinforcement, because I tested this just in a conference room. I set one up. We were testing the Wi-Fi link thing. This was almost a year ago. And I had somebody on the other end of the call in the next room, and they were talking, and the camera on the owl cam keeps looking up at the speakers on the wall, because that's, as far as it knows, that's where the person is. They're that white box on the wall talking at me. So it doesn't know the difference between somebody sitting at the table talking and a loudspeaker on the wall, because it doesn't know. It's just steering to the loudest noise in the room. So it is not a good solution for any sort of other audio reinforcement system or a large room. If you have a small room with just a display and nothing else, hey, have at it. I will send you some of them. Please.
Does not work well with others.
Anyway, there you go. It's our favorite piece of hardware that we love to hate. Do you have a question for the AV SuperFriends? A topic to suggest? Or were we just really, really wrong on something and you'd like to give us a piece of your mind? Well, don't just yell at your computer. Send us an email and we'll actually read it. Mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. We're always looking for good ideas to discuss openly. And if your message is just full of great stuff, we might just invite you on the show. Mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. All right. Well, we're joined today by a very special guest. Geoff Robinson from PTZOptics is here to talk about some very cool stuff that PTZ just announced at, well, it wasn't at InfoComm. It was prior to that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to tell us all about it. You've been working with Geoff on this particular announcement, this release, and we'll just go from there. So what do you got for us?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for letting me bring a friend, you guys. So this is one of my favorite pieces of news that I've gotten to announce this year. We announced it just prior to the NAMM show, and then we showed it off at InfoComm as well. But Geoff Robinson, who is one of the product managers at PTZOptics, and who worked directly on bringing this technology into existence, is here to talk about PTZOptics' new, totally free, you can go to their website and download it right now, firmware update that brings MIDI control to the current generation line of PTZ cameras that PTZOptics offered. When we announced that this was happening right before NAMM, we said it was going to be available for the PTZOptics 12X. That was a lie. It is available for the PTZOptics 12X and the 20X and the 30X, yes, the entire line of cameras all at once. You can go download it, start messing around, start doing like God knows what, using any MIDI device in the world to steer and control a PTZ camera. So that's the news. Geoff is the progenitor of this project, so he can give you all of the details, explain how it works, but I'm just excited to let you guys nerd out together.
All right. Well, I like that. Is PTZOptics is that the actual? Is that how that actually? Because it's like I don't know what that is.
Opti.
Opti.
PTZ
what is plural
Opti
for? Or not even plural, but anyway. So
Possessive.
Possessive. That's it. Yeah.
PTZOptics is awkward but correct.
Yeah, that's one of those ones. I was like, I guess it's right. It makes sense. Well, Geoff, we're glad to have you here. So,
Thank you.
I think I know I speak for myself, and Jamie, you and I we talked about some of this MIDI control stuff, and we actually thought it was super fascinating. So we're like, we want to actually have you on the show. So thank you for coming in, and I don't know, where did it come from, and kind of give us the background on kind of how this came to be.
Yeah, sure. So we were approached by the MIDI Association, which is what governs the MIDI protocol, about 10 weeks ago now, and they were sort of fishing, going around to camera manufacturers, and we don't know if this is right, but do you guys have a way to control your cameras with MIDI? We actually had created a very small sort of functional app to call presets on a very locked in by per key. So it was mapped to like C0 would call preset 1. And if you didn't hit C0, you were never mapping that. And presets are basically predetermined pan tilt zoom positions with the camera. And so they had seen that and they said, well, do you actually have an ability to control the camera with MIDI? And I said, well, give me 2 weeks and let's see what we can do. And that's sort of how it came about.
You have just opened up all kinds of issues for your company because it only takes you 2 weeks, huh? Only 2 weeks, huh?
2 weeks. Wow.
Just 2 weeks.
Fast.
Well, I mean,
2 weeks to the first, just I can do it, and about 8 weeks past that to get some basic control.
2 weeks to proof of concept, right?
Yes.
Was there a use case that existed, or was it just like a general inquiry, like a dare? Like, I dare you to control all your cameras with MIDI. Like, what happened there?
It was a dare. Development by dare.
Isn't that how most of it works?
Yeah, so they had actually seen our cameras in a couple places that they had been visiting recently. So I believe they saw it in the Jazz Museum of Harlem. And that sort of made them think, okay, and just like everyone, they've been trying to figure out how to bring video closer to their protocol. So everyone's live streaming over the past 2 years.
Yeah, the MIDI Association, I don't think I'm getting out of bounds by saying this. They actually have their own white label video conferencing app specifically for musicians called MIDIable. And they were looking for a way to bring MIDI control, like camera MIDI control, into that app in a unified way too, because they over the past couple of years, live streaming has become a really critical part of a lot of musicians' livelihoods, while at the same time it's become much harder to get a good live streaming setup. And a lot of these people already have really intense setups anyway. Like, you've got a whole plethora of equipment sitting in front of you, instruments, control boards, etc. You don't want to add one more thing if you can use one of the things you've already got as your camera controller.
I think it's cool because I think you mentioned it, the streamers and all that. And we see them all the time, and I'm like, is that the actual market, or was there some other use case? And we started to think about it and talk about it a little bit as we were leading up to this, and I was like, there's a ton of fascinating ways that you could actually deploy this that are lower tech simple than having to have a very complicated network for control. And this seemed to make perfect sense that we never even saw it coming. It was so under the radar that it was just landed like, oh yeah, that seems like that would totally make sense. And we started thinking about different pressure mats and all these different sensors as a way to like capture, right? And so I brought up the other day that it's kind of the inverse lighting technician thing, where they're usually putting out light and with their controller. Now this is a way for them to bring in light, and it starts to unravel, and you get all these different avenues and cul-de-sacs of how you could make this work. And Jamie, I'm going to throw it over to you because I'm sure you have some interesting thoughts in your mind around how you could like wedge this into your triggerable environments, because I think you've done some fascinating things with buttons and triggers and pads and the like.
I think initially I was like, that is a really cool and quirky thing. That sounds like fun, but I didn't have an application for it within higher ed specific right away. I immediately went to House of Worship. Mm-hmm. So I guess my first question is since this kind of came out, NAMM and things, has House of Worship just have you started hearing it going, hey, wait a minute, now I can have my keyboard player and I don't have to have a right? Have you started seeing that market in particular maybe open up a little bit?
Yeah, well, House of Worship is definitely a large customer base for us, and even take it back from just the instrument. What a lot of churches use is a program called ProPresenter, and ProPresenter is basically like a PowerPoint slides for hymns and stuff. And what's cool about ProPresenter is you actually can do MIDI actions before and after each slide, so you can send a note on command or a note off command when the slide gets pulled up or when the slide ends, and so you can start automating your production based on where you are in the slides that you've created in ProPresenter, and you can start saying, well, hey, the hymn's over, let's point to the pastor, and hey, the hymn's about to start, let's point to the chorus, and you can start just using those basic actions to start automating. Obviously, the instruments are much more interesting to me as you start to play with keys and sliders and dials, but yeah, I would say the just using some of the pieces that people are already using in production, and then starting to see where people are using actual controllers in their production, like DJs in music venues are usually using DMX and MIDI controllers. So why not try and bring control to what they already have?
Well, and that's what I was thinking, like the easy button on Christmas programs, because so many of those, such as you said, ProPresenter, so many of those do tie directly into the normal MIDI things. Or if you bring up, you can even slide in your own little triggers within your own track that's moving cameras and crap on a predetermined track of some sort. I found all kinds of neat ideas, music videos, just cool things that all of a sudden when you go into the pedal board or whatever, and it's all tied back, you can just trigger these cameras and move them around and the presets. So I don't have a wonderful use for it, but man, I'm going to try. I will have one of these things jammed in using it. We have a big conservatory at our university, and they are redoing one of their performance halls, and they've wanted something like this in particular for senior recitals. Because they don't always have, look, they have a bunch of audio engineers, and the second you say, well, just put a camera in here, somebody freaks out. But now we say, hey, look, now you can do this camera, and it's the same thing that you've been using you've been trained on, the equipment you have, the software you do, we can just do it. And that's the part that kind of excited me from my professional stance on that.
And I think the whole thing is just, as we think of how we interact with cameras, endpoints, things like that in spaces, that this is just another avenue that the event that's taking place is interacting with the technology, right? You're not having to go to some like portal and interact with this unique thing. It opens up all the triggering mechanisms that exist so that as the event is taking place or wherever it is, like it's dynamic. And it's almost like a weird play on of like event adaptive AI control, is that you're using the pieces you have in your space to determine the outcome. And it may be the same show over and over, but if something is different and it triggers in a way, guess what? Your produced product can be slightly different too. And it's already there. There's no programming that has to happen against it. I think that's just a different way of capturing that analog environment. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, this is going to change. Oh, sorry, Rachel. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is going to change how I design AV for our music department. We were just talking about a piano lab here recently and going through design. And before this was even talked about or announced, I wish I knew this was coming, because we would have designed things differently, because the piano instructor wanted a camera to follow her fingers on the keyboard, which already has MIDI control on it. So this is a perfect fit for that educational piece, if you will.
Yeah, and I was just to build off of what Marc was just saying, I think that there is a real possibility here for this technology to be used in event-based automation, in like not just house of worship or educational applications, which I think that does make sense. It's like practical, you could use this right away. But somebody's going to figure out a really cool way to make this part of like an immersive experience or an art piece.
I'm already planning my Christmas program, my outdoor lights.
Yeah.
Now the people can be involved with it. I'm starting happening.
Yeah, I mean it is a new, very simple, very like lightweight, like no code, interactive trigger mechanism that one of the reasons I love this, one of the reasons I was so excited about it, is we know some of the ways that it's going to be used, but we have no idea what all of the things that people are going to figure out to do with this technology will be. I mean, but frankly, before this project came on my radar, I didn't really know all of the things that MIDI could do, like all of the different kinds of actions that you could initiate using the MIDI protocol. And like now that I do know, it only makes sense to me that you would bring in additional senses beyond, sight and touch, the way that MIDI has been used traditionally. Or sorry, sound and touch, the way that MIDI has been used traditionally.
When the MIDI organization came to you, was there even a second of, what? Oh, hell no. Or was it just like, wait a minute, this is gold? I mean, how did that process go?
I would have asked why. Like, what are you after here, right? What's your goals here? What are you trying to do? And did they have an answer for that if you asked that question?
Well, in truth, I didn't really ask. We had been working on MIDI for integration with another device, and I had been looking into different solutions. We actually have also been working on a larger way to build out a full implementation of the MIDI protocol to our control system that was never going to be ready before NAMM, where we were hoping to have something ready. But so yeah, we've been looking at the MIDI protocol for some time. So it was sort of like, okay, well now I have a good reason to really just go and get this working.
Did you have the "I told you so" moment? Like, go back to your research and development, your bosses, and say, see us dorking around with this for years. It's going to pay off. You're going to sell product. Did you have one of those?
Well, I think we have to sell product now that I've released it to, so I can do the "I told you so" thing.
Was there any like weird hurdle that like it didn't just work like you thought it was going to be, like in that development piece or that writing that or porting it through, that you had to like stumble through? You don't have to get exact about. Was there anything that wasn't straightforward like in the whole process, or was it just pretty low hanging fruit the entire time?
Well, I originally tried to implement it directly through our USB 2 port as a serial device. And as I started going through that, I said, okay, the amount of work that I'm going to have to do to create the code, to get that code over to the manufacturer, to do the tests. And so I stumbled on the Web MIDI API, which works through Chrome and Edge, and where I sort of that first week with USB started saying, okay, never going to work once I found that Web MIDI API, and I knew I could just write JavaScript instead of trying to do some lower level code. That's where I started saying, okay, this could really work. This is something that's going to happen.
So you have the typical AV thing. You try to use the USB, and you're like, yeah, let's not use that.
Yeah,
It's universal for nothing.
Universal suck protocol. So you got this going, and I want to reiterate, there's not a weird in between software thing. This just happens. It's all on the camera itself.
So it works through the camera's web UI. We expose the Web MIDI API through the camera's web UI, and Web MIDI API allows anything that's on the local bus of the computer, on the local MIDI bus, to connect to it. Now, in Windows, there's an extra step that needs to be taken if you're using a DAW or you're using ProPresenter or any other software, where you have to use some sort of MIDI loopback device to create a virtual port that then can be recognized by the Web MIDI API, because until you can actually get that software to actually talk to Windows and then sort of it to be seen on the bus, it's not going to communicate. So with your Bluetooth and USB MIDI devices, as long as they're connected to your computer, they're going to show up in the web UI for control. If you have software in Windows, you have to take one extra step. In Apple, they have a little bit more built-in MIDI tools, and you just have to open the audio MIDI interface and create a virtual MIDI port from there.
Okay, now, something that always comes up, especially in our vertical, securities, right? So we're throwing around Web MIDI, we're throwing around, you have to enable, we're throwing around those kind of things, which, as you may or may not know, in our world is, like an act of Congress. It's never going to happen. So have you worked some of that development around a more managed lockdown versions of these softwares, so that when us higher ed nerderies come in, we say, we can do this without any special extra administrative rights and things? I don't know if you've even thought about that as far as an enterprise lockdown network, and how is it going to work, or am I going to have to fight a whole bunch of security battles?
Well, if your network doesn't allow you to get to our website, that's going to be a problem. The Web MIDI API only works through the HTTPS interface, and we can allow you to install an SSL cert to try and create a verified domain. Even in a LAN, you can do that. But yeah, if you can't get to the web UI, it's going to be hard to use the Web MIDI API. We are planning to try and integrate MIDI directly into the camera in the future. Obviously, this was what we could get going in a short amount of time to do a proof of concept, get the control working. Now that that's working, we're starting to say, okay, we have something working. Do we want to continue diving into the web-based API, or should we really look to getting this actually working on board the camera, where then you could, our cameras have serial RS-232 inputs, where we can theoretically take the analog MIDI TRS, feed that through there. I do think I can get the USB serial working as well. And then there's RTP MIDI, which is the sort of network-based MIDI we're also looking at. So yeah, I would say, yeah, again, if you can't use the web UI, that's going to be a problem. But we are looking at different ways that we can provide the MIDI control without forcing you through the web UI.
I think
fantastic.
It's fascinating to watch, to see if all of a sudden we get like this weird backward-looking like development that happens where, I don't know, we can go around the room here and see, but I always have this problem of like mismatched cameras and controllers around. And does this create like a lower common denominator of like a language that maybe people will say, oh, you know what, if your camera can do this, or your endpoint can do this, I can control it, and I'm no longer having to like match cameras, controllers, and all this other stuff. Like, this gives another out in that conversation where it's like, I'm not having to have an entire ecosystem of one brand. And we're kind of getting that interoperable use case by looking backwards at like an older language in a weird way.
Mark, it sounds like you're trying to talk me into putting MIDI as our central control system across campus.
I want you to abandon all of your shit you have. I want you to just have MIDI. One keyboard at every lectern and you're done.
Or put
that's where we're going.
Far and near on C and D keys, and that's
all you need.
Yeah.
You know, I recall a conversation that we had many months ago about how cool physical buttons are and how we were replacing all these touchscreens with just big physical buttons that you could just mash. And at the time, we never considered that could be just like a keyboard.
Or a drum kit.
Right.
Yes.
Rachel, to clarify,
drumsticks.
it wasn't just physical buttons. Jamie wanted to build a control system out of a whack-a-mole that he got from
and this makes it easier.
It does.
Because now I can even use that protocol to recall a preset that triggers some other thing when it's I'm telling you, whack-a-mole's coming.
I think it's perfect.
Just have to add node on, node off to the electrical signal in the whack-a-mole, and then you can do it.
There you go. See? It's on my side.
Awesome.
So, I just needed
Geoff,
an investor.
I want to make one request for the next time you guys set this up at a trade show. And I brought this up to Rachel, and she said there just wasn't enough time between NAMM and Infocom to do it. But at your booth, your trade show folks need to build the giant piano that Robert Loggia played in Big, and then that can drive your cameras for your demos. So you could probably get the corpse of Robert Loggia. You may be able to get Tom Hanks. I don't know, but just something to consider for the next trade show opportunity.
Well, we've been looking at wireless footpad MIDI, and the idea of maybe having 12 of those together, where you could do the whole chromatic scale. That'd be fun.
What was the crazy dancing game like 20 years ago?
Oh, Dance Revolution?
Dance Revolution.
Yeah, that's the perfect deployment of that.
Or the worst deployment of that. I don't know.
It's perfect. I
Only
think
one way to find out, and it's by having DDR and the big piano at the booth in ISE.
That's right.
There's your goal. Yeah.
With paddling cameras going back and forth the entire time.
We're going to give so many people epileptic fits.
Or just motion sickness, one of the two.
No,
this is very cool. It's one of the things I think Jamie put it best. You know, we're not sure what the immediate application is right now, but damn, there's some cool potential coming down the road. It's going to be one of those things you keep in your back pocket, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, you know what I can do with this? And then there you go.
You'll be somewhere where you're going to need it. It's going to be Justin. You're going to be asked to deploy
I
something.
need to go back and go to that piano lab,
yeah.
needs analysis again, and go, wait a second. I have a solution now. No problem.
I think it's fascinating. I love the fact that it's kind of resurrecting something that people just didn't even think about, and it's been gone. That's why part of me believes like MIDI was having a roundtable event. Like, we need to become relevant, guys. What are we going to do? We got to find somebody, and they just find a camera company. Anybody.
I spent a few hours trying to figure out how to get a camera to track someone's fingers on a piano. I'll be honest, it wasted a lot of my time. And so if you could have done this a lot earlier, I could have got 4 to 5 hours of my life back. So I fault PTZOptics for that.
MIDI, man, who knew?
I know.
Well, all right. Well, last requests or dreams. And Geoff, I'm not sure if you want people to get a hold of you or not. If people can get a hold of you, want to talk about shop or MIDI in this product or anything else you may have, what's a good way they can get a hold of you?
You can reach out. I'll give you my email. It's Geoff at PTZOptics. The hard thing is my name is Geoff. So that's the only issue you have. You don't know JEFF.
Is there another JEFF at PTZ who keeps getting all your email?
No.
Got to set up a redirect then. Geoff, thank you so much for coming on and helping us to explore this, my very favorite thing from 2022.
It was my pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on and
Geoff.
hanging out with us, Geoff. Thanks.
Yeah. Take care.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's the AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts.
All right, so for our
from.
last topic today, we're going to talk about the current challenges of hiring AV staff. Well, maybe let me rephrase. The current challenges of hiring staff, of finding qualified applicants, I think everybody here is either currently going through the process of hiring or is hired recently, and we're all kind of running into similar challenges. I know Larry and I have been going back and forth trying to hire the same people, one of whom may or may not be on this call right now.
Man.
Come on.
But it's one of those things where for example, I've got a position just listed out there and got a handful of candidates. Now, is that a question of the reflection of the general job market, or is that a reflection of that, we're requiring somebody else to move to Laramie, Wyoming, which for some people is great, others not so much. So what are you guys seeing out there as far as challenges of finding candidates, of finding qualified applicants, and of getting those people on board?
Nothing.
I mean, I just started my search, and so I'm still curious to find out how it turns out. But I am worried that, we started at the tail end of the Great Resignation, to where everybody who's jumped or was looking to jump has already jumped. And now there's that whole pool of people who haven't been at their current job long enough to jump again. And
it's never stopped them in the past.
It's because of the way higher ed works. I'm advertising for a position, but the best applicant might not be the best fit. And I'm kind of worried about that. I don't have the flexibility to decide later what this position actually is. I have to hire for that position and advertise for that position. But depending on who applies, I might have somebody else that, is a really good fit for the team, just may not be for that particular spot.
So I would hire that person.
Gone.
I would hire that person, then create another position at the same level, and then just switch them over to that one later.
Or shuffle people around you already have that one, and maybe
I don't think I can create another position at the level. That's my concern.
Creating positions is hard. That in itself.
And I created this one, so I don't think I'll have the ability to axe this and create another one.
I think that's what we ran into when we did this 6 months ago. Was that very thing? Is they were the people that applied did fit somewhere else, but you can't just in the institutions. They don't just allow us to move people around, and creating a position is horrible. And then we created a position brand new from scratch, and the pressure from university of this has got to be filled soon. So you couldn't even have the luxury of, okay, that one didn't work, open her back up. That one didn't work, open it back up. But it's just this enormous pressure of, by God, we created this, you're going to fill it ASAP. And I think that's the wrong way to hire sometimes. It's okay, we know we have a need for this. Yes, we're all in a hurry, but I don't want to hire garbage. And because, let's face it, also in higher ed, people never leave. And you can't get rid of them.
That seems bananas to me, Jamie. We literally couldn't do it. If you gun to my head saying you need to write a specific job role, interview only the applicants that you get within a set period of time, and then hire one of them for that specific job role, put them on your team and make them work, gun to my head, could not do it.
That's almost all over higher ed. That's kind of the way it is.
That's all we do.
Rachel, you just described to a T recruiting at a university.
Yeah, and especially when you talk about the roles that Chris is looking for and the role I'm looking for, mine is a design engineer. Mm-hmm. Finding an AV design engineer is hard enough. Finding one that wants to work in higher ed, that's really hard.
I think the landscape of higher ed's not helping itself. I've been noticing drifting downward as far as competitiveness into the outside private sector world.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so I think there's already this stigma. It's I can do better, right? I can do better. And it's if I have to, I will, but I can do better. And everybody's playing that I'll keep my options open.
I would say give it a minute. Give it a couple of months, because the economy is gonna tank. Private
bottom
sector
out a bit.
is
Oh yeah, I think
just
you're right.
headed towards a massive cliff, and then it'll be kind of a buyer's market for talent again.
Because
For
everyone's going to be laid off.
for
But let's-
institutions that can offer stability.
Are
in
you
a
saying
time
I should
of
write?
economic
I should write my
crisis?
job listings now to say, for those of you who are about to get fired in 6 months,
Yes.
get this job now and save yourself some problems.
Exactly.
by the
Just prevent
by
the
the time
economic shortfall.
by the time some manufacturer's product become available, there won't be anybody to put them in.
It is.
Um,
It is really real. Like right now, though, what you're saying, Larry, about the Great Resignation and how much more difficult it has gotten to hire people, we've observed it, and even our clients who are manufacturers have felt it. If they are hiring for a position that requires a person to physically be there and connect a thing to another thing, like to make pieces of hardware go together, it's impossible. It's really, really difficult to get people to commit to a physical location in an ongoing basis anymore. And we just experienced ourselves for the first time hiring somebody who lives in a different time zone. We hired somebody who lived all the way on the Pacific coast,
Bunch of
because
weirdos
that's
out there.
what we needed to do to hire the best candidate
Welcome.
for our position.
Yeah,
If
and
we
I'm-
could
and
not
I'm
hire
sitting
somebody in this
sitting
time
here
zone.
in the middle. I'm sitting here in the middle with my PR degree. Nothing.
PR. degree.
Nothing.
And he hasn't applied.
So
That's right. Whoops.
It is a real thing. 'Cause I know at university here, we've had several positions, even like C-suite level positions that are not actually getting applicants. Like, in even around that tier, I've been asked, "Can you apply for this so that we have more people in the pool?" I'm like, well, thanks for the endorsement, but no, I'm not going to do that.
Can you put your name in here, just a sandbag,
it's like-
candidate
like-
pool?
Are
'Cause
you
now
being
that's like-
asked to be a token or something? Like what?
think
Well, no,
What kind of,
they'll have to.
weird
They'll
metrics
have
incentivization is going on that they want that.
because they'll have to fail it if they don't get enough
Yeah, if
applicants.
there's a
they
minimum
have
of
to have
candidates, yeah.
applicants, and so
And it's that drive to fill it as soon as possible. So if they don't have 7 applicants, they won't
Yep.
close the position.
Yep.
And if they can't close the position, they can't actually hire anybody. So even if they have the perfect candidate sitting there, they still have to have 7 applicants and
Oh,
diversified.
Yeah.
And it's a nightmare.
Leadership roles in particular are tough. There's all sorts of additional parameters around that. Whereas a technical or an IT role, a staff role is often easier to fill if you have at least multiple candidates, multiple applicants. For say, I keep using those terms interchangeably. They're not. So applicant, somebody who applies; candidate, somebody you identify as actually qualified for the job. And that's my challenge right now with my current open positions is that I get several applicants, but I only have a couple of candidates, and that makes it frustrating.
I understand that, and it makes me think of wedding dress shopping, which I'm sure you're all going to be fascinated by. But almost everybody I know that's ever
love
bought
that.
a wedding dress has ended up purchasing the first one they tried on. But that is only after a process of having subsequently tried on 200 other dresses.
well, it's all
That's
about
why I will never try on the first one.
it's all about
Well.
that champagne. Once that champagne gets flowing, you're going to be trying on dresses all day.
It is, but it's
gonna be a
also
thing.
all about the
It's an
fact that
event.
you're making a massive investment in something that you're only going to get one of and that you're going to be fairly stuck with. And that even if you feel really good about that one, you need a basis for comparison before you make the commitment.
I think it was one of our directors here said it's actually like hiring somebody's worse than marrying them. It's actually harder to get somebody that you hired than it is like to get out of a marriage. Like you can
I think
divorce
that's
somebody
only
and
in
walk
higher
away.
ed. We fire
Yeah,
people all the
And so
time.
there's always this fear that but there's a fear that you're going to get the wrong person. I'm sensing some of that too. It's like you really you've gone through all this work, you've put in all this time and effort, and you created this position, you did all this language, and you got everything right. You went and you soul searched, and these are everything I need done. You put it out there, and you're like, I got one person, and man,
And it's
I really
super hard to get
hope
rid of people
that
in
person is the
higher ed
right
too.
person. So there's
Well,
anxiety.
and I
around
mean,
it.
even if it isn't, right? Even if you are in a culture, in a hire fast, fire fast culture, it is a bit like a marriage in that when you bring people into the team and you invest in those people and building them up, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, that damages the team. It damages the people who've left behind because you've taken their time in training that person and you've hurt the team morale in having it fall apart. So it is every time you hire somebody, it is a big risk, a big leap of faith. I don't think that's wrong to compare it to a marriage.
So Chris, what's in looking through applicant pool? What's the hang up? What's the experience? What are the things that are separating the candidate from the applicant? And what's the holdup? What are things that people aren't bringing? So let's say somebody on this call is putting the final touches on resumes that he needs to make sure that he make sure that he has it on there.
Yeah. So I guess you could.
Is this insider trading?
But no, it's not. So the particular position I'm hiring for right now, I've got 2 more in the queue. And so I think by the end of my first year here, I will have rewritten 5 positions and hired for 3 of them. So that's always fun. But the position I'm hiring for right now is our programmer. My current programmer and engineer is retiring after 29 years. So congratulations to him for escaping with all his sanity still intact. But I'm hiring for a new programmer. I need a straight up, no fooling programmer who wants to do programming and, maybe 25% engineering. So I went through all the process of rewriting that position. You guys have all seen the position. I bounced it off every one of you to kind of get some thought on that, got that all fine tuned, got the position listed out. And so I get some candidates who meet that on paper. Looks great. Have to start the interview process and talk to them and see if they are a good cultural fit and a good, fit for the team. Because Rachel, your point's 100% dead on. So they may bring the right technical skill set, but the wrong personality or just may not jive with the team. So you have to find somebody there. But Jamie, to your question, I get a lot of applicants, and I know you mentioned the same thing when you were hiring for your design engineer position. There was you get a lot of people who it's like, did they actually not read the application? Did they see 1 or 2 words and just threw their resume in? So I have things in there, at least the way we do it here is you say there are required qualifications. You must meet the following. Now, some of them are very general. You have to have X number of years of experience, or you have to have, a general background in this. But I can also add in there, you must have the following industry-related certifications, because I need someone who can hit the ground running and within a week or 2 is like up to speed, and they can, they already have those skills. They don't have to train anybody on this, and there's plenty of people out there. Every integrator has a whole team of them. Larry, you were one for years. But I'm finding a lot of people who are like, well, yeah, I used Extron stuff once, so I'm qualified. And they put their resume in. It's like, well, we're not hiring a technician, and kind of to your point, Larry, this would be like I get candidates who would be a good fit for another role on the team. I can't just swap this around. I'm certainly not going to pay a technician the same rate I'm going to pay a programmer. So it makes it that much more difficult. But I'm getting applicants who are either tangentially or not at all related as far as their skill sets. They just don't bring the right skill set. And then I have a few candidates who do, and on paper, they're a good match. So it's having to parse through that and determine now my candidate pool, which granted I'm in Laramie, Wyoming, so it's a bit far out of the way for people, but my candidate pool is very shallow at that point. And so hopefully, one of those few candidates are a good fit and will be a good hire, and we don't have a failed process or a failed search, because then we have to go through this process again. So
to me,
that's one of the frustrations.
Look at that. And we've had that same kind of question here internally. Are certain positions best grown internally? And I think you're actually looking at one of those positions, because it's so closely tied to the culture in your operations, in your engineering. It's such there. I would rather take the opposite approach and let me go weed into the deeper end of the candidate pool and find out what I can get more of. If it's lower level technicians or whatever it is, bring them in and be able to groom them and move them through that. And I get time is a part of this, and you need somebody to hit the
if I had
now.
If I had world enough in time, then I would do it.
But I think that it's almost, because once you hit that programmer designation, I think more doors close in your willingness of jobs you're going to take than open up for you.
Which is one of the reasons, if you guys recall, I refer to it as a programmer position. I did not call it a programmer position. I believe the compromise term was control systems engineer.
Right.
So they are doing programming, not 100%, but that they are doing other things. Now, to your point, absolutely. So I have now, Larry and I have been talking about this. I have a student who is kind of my programming intern who is interested in this, is a CS student who can learn that. I have a technician who is probably about 2 years away from being able to really do that stuff. So I'm going to grow that skill set internally, because even if you do have a programmer on staff, and we're a small team of 6 people, but if you have a programmer on staff, and like you said, they leave, they take a job somewhere else, their wife gets a job somewhere and off they move, or whatever that might be, you're left with nothing. And that's kind of where we are now, because we had a very shallow bench to start with, and I have to grow all those skills, and not just in the higher level programming and design side of things, but in the project management, the installation, and the general support. I have to grow all those skills on this team so they are mutually supportive. So they do have some overlap there in their skill sets, and they're not kind of like everyone has their silo. Oh, this is our event person, and this is our support person, and this is our install person. Like, no, they should be a lot of crossover there, so they can mutually support each other. Like, for example, we had BIAMP come out to campus, and we did a day-long training class. So every one of the people is now up to speed on building and modifying DSP configuration. So it's no longer you have to talk to the audio person to go fix your room. Anyone can do it. So that is definitely part of the building out the whole team. But the challenge of when you have a big hole at the top and need to fill that with someone who brings a very specific skill set to the team for that probably year and a half until somebody else is able to kind of back them up. It does make hiring for that position that much more challenging.
Yeah, one of the things you had mentioned, and I'm in the same boat, where I listed qualifications of certifications. Like, I needed a CTSD for my engineering role, and you needed a person who was a certified programmer. I've been programming Crestron since 2004. I also have my MCSA. I never got my Crestron certified programmer certificate. I am much better at Crestron programming than I ever was at Microsoft Network Administration. So, I'm trying to figure out how I can judge the knowledge without relying on the easy certification.
That's one of the challenges we had too, was that I had, I had 2 of the keyword builders, right? They threw every freaking keyword on the planet on their resume. And after talking to them, you realize that it was, as you said earlier, Chris, I opened it once.
I saw one of the words, so yeah.
I looked at the box once, yeah, but did you do anything with it? And it turns out that the person that had done the most didn't have all the qualifications, and I was just going to give Larry a hard time. It's like, well, I can't move to Greensboro because I don't have my D, right? I don't have my CTSD.
So would it be better if we put that certification in the desired category instead of required, and then as you can interview people, you can evaluate at that point?
Well,
but
the
only
phrase
issue
or equivalent work experience contains multitudes, but it's really hard to judge. I was just wondering how many of you guys, when you're doing an interview process, include a practical exercise as part of the interview process?
I do.
We do. Yeah.
I've tried to.
This is an auditory
and they
medium,
said,
guys. We can't hear raised hands.
They all did it.
We do.
I tried to, and it really, again, it was really strange because I'm not the hiring manager. I was just part of it because the hiring manager couldn't evaluate them. But, it's like, hey, look, can we run them through a test or something? Can I throw a set of plans out there? No.
No. If you have union style positions are very hard to do that kind of stuff with. If that's where
and that's nuts to me. Again, sorry, I keep using all of this ableist language. I don't understand that because I've done a lot of job interviews. I've done a lot of hiring, and nothing else really matters. There's only so much you can learn in an interview, and people like me who are excellent test takers can game an interview that doesn't include a practical exercise really well. You will not learn anything about them until you have them on the job doing the job, unless your interview actually puts them through their paces on some real, applicable job skills.
And part of the issue too is any programs or any designs they've made at previous employees are the company's intellectual property. So you can't really see examples of the work that they've already performed. You just have to take their word that they've done it.
Well, and even like I've done job interview processes that have included portfolios in the past, and I don't think that's very helpful because you don't know who has contributed to the work in that portfolio. I have seen lots of very impressive portfolios that then when it comes down to brass tacks and the person is asked to produce similar work in the context of their new role where they didn't have the support system of their old role, it turns out that they are not actually capable of producing that independently. So I want to see how somebody thinks on their feet. I want to see how they respond to a design challenge that they are given in the context of the interview. This is my husband, as you may know, is a software engineer. He's never had a job interview that didn't include a programming challenge where he is asked to actually prove that he has the skills that he says he does on his resume.
I've never had to either.
No, I've been a part of some. We've done very small, so just to get a general ideas of like what's your proficiency. Please draw out like a system that a presentation system. Yeah. They put some stuff on whiteboards, and then we've also done some for programming. Like, hey, we've opened up Simple and like locate these devices and yada and walk through it. But going back, I mean, is there a point where like appetite and demeanor for the work is more valuable than like the credential?
Absolutely.
Yes.
To a certain extent, yes. I think that
maybe.
Yeah, I think the credential gets you a baseline, but you need the right attitude for them to be successful. Yeah.
Yeah. I think attitude matters a lot, but it's another thing that's really easy to fake in an interview. Because who doesn't come into an interview being like, yes, sir, I would give my all to this job. I would sacrifice my firstborn child for this university. Except for me.
Say no, that's not how I interview either. But that's different. So when I get through this, as I go through this process, rather, when I get to the interview stage, the certifications are there because you guys were asking earlier today, are you using that like basically as a gate to get through? Yes, I am. For this particular position, yes, I am, and I'm doing that deliberately to weed out is it the wheat from the chaff or the chaff from the wheat?
Either way,
to weed out the one from the other. But the interview itself is going to be a lot of, I want to see judgment calls. I want to see the sort of, the questions are going to be sort of open-ended. You've got this sort of thing. How would you do this? Because I want to see their thought process, their approach. I want to see, is that copacetic with the way I do things? Because I do not want somebody here who is comes in with the right technical skill set on paper, but it's very much no, I do, I'm only ever looking at this product line or this type of application or whatever, especially if they're coming from outside higher ed into higher ed. I need to find somebody who is going to understand that that's a challenge. People are going to go buy freaking owl cam, stick them in a room, and then want you to make it work. So
yeah, I think that's really
that
smart.
Personality adjustment.
And another thing with the gatekeeper there, I mean, we've all talked about just between the time period we're in, higher ed, everything else, you won't always get a lot of applicants. If you don't set that bar high of who is a qualified applicant versus who's just an applicant, you can't fail a search. And so you have to choose from who's available at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, you got to have your minimum bid in place.
Yeah. And you kind of made this really sharp unicorn cookie cutter, right? That you're out and you're going to cut this perfect unicorn cookie and you're going to get the solution. So, I mean, if you write a PD in a very specific way, you're auto weeding out all the people that are going to apply. So in looking at what you've shared that you had as applicants versus quality, you're at technically almost 20%. Do you need more than 20% qualified applicants?
Well, and that's the challenge, of course, is if you get one or two good applicants and then, or let me rephrase, candidates, I keep doing that. Mm-hmm. One or two good candidates who you can take through the interview process, and then all right, these are our two, and they're both on paper, they're a match, and maybe one's a better fit, attitude-wise or personality-wise, then yeah, that's really all you need. In fact, to your earlier point, all you really need is one. I'd like to have more than that to balance against and just say, okay, I've got two or three, I can see how this goes. But that's one of the challenges of how we are building these positions and how we're going through the hiring. So if I had we but whirled enough in time, I would grow a programmer engineer rather than hire one. I need to hire one to grow that skill set here.
So if you fail a search, would you go back and rewrite the job description, or you just file it again and see what happens? You know,
I just
put a
keep pushing
different
the same
lure
thing
on
back
that
out
reel
there.
and see if you can get a different type
I've
of
done this
fish?
long enough. I know the skill set that is required at a university to do.
Well, I'm
this
asking because
successfully,
I've seen it here where, you know, we're hiring for a support manager, AV support manager, and we put AV stuff, and it failed. And so the decision was, well, let's take AV out of it just to see if we can get a manager, right? And kind of go. And I don't know where, I'm not on the committee, so I don't know exactly where that stands now, but I know that there was more applicants, but I don't know if they were qualified or not. So
well, and so we run into that here, where there's in another department in IT, they have a couple of sysadmin positions open, and there are, I think there's 1 or 2 spots open of various seniorities and designations and roles. I'm not sure exactly. It's different bailiwick. But they just leave those open, and as applicants come in. So as people do their searches for, you know, their job searches, they say, oh, look, there's one to come in. But it's written in a very, very, very generic way. So to your point, Justin, they have genericized that one to the point where almost anybody could apply, and then they're just looking for the right person to fill that role. But that also says to me, if you leave that floating out there open, maybe you don't actually need that. And at a certain point, someone's going to take that position line away from you. So
yeah, they're going to, you know, casting a wide net to get all kinds of fish and octopuses and sharks and all kinds of crap, right? Versus a targeted fishing approach to get one specific person.
So the one other thing I did want to mention, you guys are talking about this, we're leaning on the certifications too heavily as a requirement to even get them in the door. So the way I have mine phrased is you must have, in our case, Crestron, you must be a Crestron certified programmer, comma, or the ability to acquire said certification within a certain amount of time. And that's where I'm getting a little bit of pushback from HR. And they're like, well, can you extend that time? Well, yes, within limits. If I extend that time to say 5 or 10 years, well, you could have a malnourished, what's that word?
Malnourished?
Malnourished. That's the one.
Nutrition.
Malnourished. You could have a malnourished monkey, get that far. It's not going to do you any good. So at the same time, and I asked you guys this question specifically when I listed it that way. If I say you must have the certification or ability to get within, say, 1 year, that says they're far enough along the pathway already that they're bringing a significant skill set to the table. And even if they don't have that gatekeeper certification, within a year or so, they can get that, and that's probably fine. As opposed to you must meet the following sort of thing to get in the door. So there is a little bit of wiggle room there, but it's not to say that anybody who's just a standard, entry-level technician who has done some general toolbox and, whatever, can say, oh, yeah, I can do that. Well, not within a year, you can't. So no. And you need, like I said, I need someone to hit the ground running. So it is a challenge, and it is, Mark, you're right. It's a bit of a unicorn position, but it is the right position for the job. And I wanted to make sure, most importantly, that the position description was written applicable, not for today and not for 6 months from now, but for 5 years from now. This is the sort of role you need at the institution, not like, because if I just talk about what I need today, I just need more technicians to go around and smack holes in walls and hang TVs, but that doesn't get us, where we need to be down the road. So there you go. Any last thoughts on the general woes of trials, tribulations of hiring and all that fun stuff?
It's difficult, just like we thought.
I don't think it's ever supposed to be easy, right?
Yeah.
Cast wide nets. Hire as many people as you can. Get your...
Yeah, so for anybody listening out there, if you're looking for a job, I'm not hiring anymore, but Larry is. Go work for Larry.
Maybe.
No.
I'll be hiring for other positions in the future, but...
Yeah, if you want to design, North Carolina's great.
Here's my pitch then. If you want to come out to Wild and Wonderful Wyoming and
it
yell at
snowed in
integrators
June, just so
and
everyone
win
knows.
every time,
They'll give you a free horse.
Yeah.
There is actually
As
hitching
opposed
posts
to
on campus.
all the
See?
deadly snakes in Carolina, right?
Oh yeah, there is that.
I'll trade winters in June for hurricanes any day.
You guys are really selling this. Good work.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV SuperFriends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.